Fellowship early, in the 70s.
That's it, and you said so this morning. I did, but
Look at these different cakes.
feel satisfied.
And Dorothy, is that Dorothy?
Puzzling about. Oh, wow. Beautiful smiling faces.
What are we getting the back of our head?
Duke Clifford.
Hey, Steve.
Hey. Josh.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Yogacharya.
Welcome everyone to Yogacharya's 124th birthday celebration and Golden Lotus family reunion. We are blessed to have you all here today. Dear ones, my name is Deanne Talantis. People call me Dee. And I'm greatly honored to be asked to speak about the first phase of the 7 developmental stages of Song of the Morning Ranch. I am honored. So, this month, I am 50 years blessed after graduating from high school and devouring the life-changing book, Autobiography of a Yogi. I found in the newspaper in Grosse Pointe a little caption that said Hatha Yoga classes, SRF certified. And I knew that SRF, self-realization, Yogananda. And I found the teachers were George and Vivian Johnson. And they taught at the War Memorial in Grosse Pointe. We became friends. They told me of this person, J. Oliver Black, one of Yogananda's disciples. And he was leading a meditation at the Detroit Institute of Arts. I was beyond the moon. So I was 18 years old, and there I met the Yogacharya Oliver in September of 1967. Meeting him changed my life forever. In the summer of 1968, Yogacharya invited some of us flower children, along with other devotees, to see the ranch. We drove up in small groups, sharing expenses. Sturgeon Valley Road was very heavily rutted at that time, and it was a long dirt road, especially from Pickrell Lake. And it led to the property. I don't remember there being a sign at the entrance of the property at that time. Just a long and winding road. Yes, the Beatles were part of it. And there was a two-track that led up to the lush denseness of the forest as we approached the Pigeon River. Finally, we came to this brilliant opening in the first view of the lake. Trees were lining the bridge as we passed the wheelhouse. We went over the dam, and the roar of the falls greeted us. Beside the falls was the farmhouse. Down the lake path was the boathouse, and that's where our yogi stayed. Beyond that, the beautiful lodge. I had found my spiritual home. At that time, the caretakers were the Dohertys. Sorry. The Dohertys. Some of you may remember them. They had dogs and horses corralled in the front of the farmhouse, now known as the main house. After meditation with our Yogacharya, we would head to the farmhouse for a chicken dinner with smashed potatoes and greasy gravy. And he loved to say that every time. And he'd laugh and roar. And as we sat in the dining room, listening to him informally, very informally, telling us stories, parables, infused with common sense, which was really important to the Yogacharya. He always seemed to know exactly what each person needed to know or hear individually at that moment. And the radiance of his bubble of joy laugh was contagious. We all sat around just roaring with laughter. He lifted our hearts, our minds, our souls in a profound manner. He shared Paramahana's vision for this retreat as a new world center of yogic culture, a yoga university practicing oneness of all religions. Ah, me, he used to say. There was much work to be done. Roads, electricity, phone and power lines, buildings like the stone. Zoning laws, legal hurdles, and so forth. Major challenges with very little finances. Repeatedly, our Yogacharya reminded us of the vision. It will be a yoga retreat of excellence. He also often would say, may we continue working together for the furtherance of the cause of Master's work. And, reiterating, work, work, my boy, be not afraid. So began the continuous hard work and pioneering efforts of so many from all walks of life. And through your endurance, their endurance, efforts, and sacrifice, along with the great ones, divine omniscience, unconditional love, and spiritual guidance. By 1970, the first stage had begun. The Song of the Morning, Ranch, and Golden Lotus Incorporated was born, and the first resident staff came on board. Yogacharya's dream became a reality, a retreat away from the city, where people could come for relaxation and spiritual refreshment. It was a wondrous time. I cannot believe to this day I was part of it. I'm honored to be here, as I said. So, now, I just wanted to tell you that our beloved Yoga Retreat Song of the Morning Ranch is an extension of Yogacharya through time, of his devotion to Master and Master's wishes, to found such a place where devotees can pursue their love of God. Yogacharya spoke much about the future of the ranch. He told us that there would be 7 developmental stages corresponding to the 7 chakras before the ranch is in the form in which it will continue for hundreds, and sometimes he said 2,000 or 3,000 years. And on December 31st, 1974, after evening meditation, as Yogacharya sat talking with us as he always did, he told us that with Roy Thibodeau's leaving staff that day, the transition from the Phase 2 staff was complete. And his Phase 3 staff was beginning to form. Today, in honor of our reunion, we have invited 7 speakers, one of them is I, from each of these 7 phases to give us an idea of what it was like. So, Jessica Vendente was a Parkside girl. I know Parkside, I called her Joan of Arc, during Phase 2, which lasted from the very early 70s through 1974. This was a time of setting up our retreat's basic features, such as the evening meditations, SRF Sunday service, Hatha yoga classes, guest services, and a renunciant staff. Please come up, Jessica.
Oh, yeah, it's been a while. It was, I believe, 1969 when I first found the path of SRF and heard about Mr. Black and in Michigan, and I wanted to meet him, and I was 16 years old. By the time I was 17, I did meet him. In fact, the first time I met him was at Kriya initiation. That's another story I didn't have in, but it's an amazing story too. And then I did not see him again until maybe maybe a few months later. I came up to Song of the Morning, and I wanted to talk with him, and I wanted to become an SRF nun. And that's all I could think about, you know. And so everybody said, well, you know, go talk to Yogacharya about this. So I did. And it was under the gazebo at above by the lodge. And he took my poem as though he was reading it, you know, and he just kind of studied it for a while. And then he says, well, I think this time you need to be in the world. And so he said, you had been a renunciant in a previous incarnation. But if you would like to be on, you know, on staff one day, you know, would you like that? And I said, yes, I would. I was still in high school. So after high school, for a while I was in the Milwaukee area, and then I came up here. It was, I believe it was like 1971, 72, and I moved in with Irmgard Kurtz and her daughter Chris. Chris was still in school, and we lived downtown Gaylord in a little apartment. The original staff was still in place, and oftentimes we would go to the ranch and be with Yogacharya, but we would also go down to the Detroit Art Institute and see him there as well. So it was just a real exciting time, you know, and I was waiting to go on staff. And that day came, and it was it was still kind of wintry outside. It was just like early spring, late winter. And we came here, the 3 of us, and for a short while it was only the 3 of us here. So that was, the domes weren't finished. I had a bike. I used to ride around in here just for something to do. I was young still, you know. And And then when Yogacharya would come up, we would spend a lot of time with him. And then by summer, the summer staff started to come in. And let's see, I had, at that time, it was Lee Morgan. She was a yoga teacher trainer from Toronto. She was here on summer staff. Roy, Jeff Duncan, Deborah Carlson, a gal named Carol Harder became the secretary later on. There's a Victor Besabava, and there was probably more too, but those were the few that I remember the most on staff. I do want to mention how Yogacharya, he had a sincere interest in everyone that he met. And it didn't matter what walk of life you were or how old you were, he could just make you feel comfortable. And because of that, he was very much like a father figure to, I think, many of us. And while Chris and Irmgard and I were here, Chris had her 8th grade graduation. And it was just something small, but it means so much to me because it was like the three of us, went and watched Chris graduate, and we would sit in the Vanderbilt High School and watched her. And as the kindergarten class would come up, he would take interest in some and make a little prediction here and there. So that was always fun, it's just something that I remember. For a while I lived in upstairs in the main house, and then I was moved to the boathouse, and between the boathouse and Parkside, I used to travel back and forth with Carol Harder and Lee Morgan, and so we became the Parkside girls, Lee and I shared. Yeah, that was his residence in Detroit, and he still during the summers he was up here, but in the fall he kept doing services at the Detroit Art Institute. So we would go down, if I remember correctly, it was like Friday, and we would drive down Saturday, and then Sunday we would have the service, and then drive back up here on Monday. So it was, he had a beautiful home. There were, Lee and I stayed in the attic room. It was quite large. Lee was in the process of making his recordings of service readings down in the basement area, and Lee was helping him with that. Carol was the secretary, and I was the cook and housekeeper. Very inexperienced as well. In fact, Yogacharya, the first morning I was at the boathouse, I was in the kitchen, and it was I was to make breakfast, and I didn't even really know how to cook an egg, and that's what he showed me how to do, and that's what, it was so, there he was, I can remember him standing beside me in front of the stove, and he showed me how to make the most perfect egg, with a little bit of water and the steam, it would come out poached, and you wouldn't have to flip it. So it was perfect, there was no risk involved. And after that, I just studied a cookbook the best I could. But I managed, and during our free time, I started to teach myself how to play harmonium, and I knew some of the basic chants. Well, he could hear that, and he decided then after service on Sunday, we would have a satsang, a brunch, and then it was my job at the end to do the closing chants. And I have to laugh because I can't even play a note on the harmonium anymore. And how he got me to do that still amazes me that I did that, you know. So there's always some sort of magic going on around him, as far as I was concerned. Let's see, there was a nightly meditation at the lodge when we were here. He usually led them, and then later on he started to invite people to, and we had to be ready to have a closing prayer. And this is another little story, but it's the first time he decided to do this, he forewarned us, so we all had our prayer in our head and ready to go. And he had everybody, as they walked in, he had a hat, and they had to write down who they thought he was going to call. They wanted to see what their intuition was like, I guess, you know. And so I knew I was going to get called. And he said, as I was sitting there, he said, this person knows they're going to get called. And sure enough, I got called. So, you know, it's just, oh, okay, I didn't even get near, okay, I'm being called away. Yoga teaching, we all had to become a yoga teacher. A lot of the classes were held down here. I was in Lee's crash course. I don't know if I even had a month of classes, you know, and before I was thrown in the lodge to teach. And so there I was, one of the busiest summer weekends, and it was just packed like sardines right in front of me, to the side of me, and it was my first class. And I was young. I was very shy and timid, you know. And just as I was about to teach, the door opens, and who walks in but Yogacharya? And so he comes, and he sits down in the corner, and he decides to watch me teach. And so I did, you know, I did my best. And afterwards, at the end of the class, instead of everybody just looking at me, they all turned and looked at him. And it was kind of, we're waiting for what he had to say, you know. She says, she did very well. She says, but I see her teaching even in her older age. And so here I am. I'm still trying, but you know. Let me see if I missed anything good.
Was Mrs. Black still alive when you were at
No,
Merced?
she died. I didn't get to meet her. It was before I actually got to meet him. On Sunday evening down there at Parkside, oftentimes we would go to dinner with his daughter Phyllis, and he was a member of the Detroit Golf Club and the athletic club. It was very, very fancy, and you just couldn't get in there. You had to, you know, it was like a huge waiting list. So all I had was a couple of pair of blue jeans and some tops, you know. And so he had Lee go out, and he was so kind and generous to make sure I fit the part, which I could also wear to Sunday service and present myself. So that was, it's just, these little memories are just amazing, just to be in his presence. I will say I helped with the drive back and forth, and as I mentioned to Dee, Lee and Yogacharya was, I didn't get my driver's license until I was in Gaylord, and they took me to get it, which I thought was fun. You know, it's a nice small memory, but he was there and a part of me getting my driver's license. So I think my time is up, and it's really nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Such sweet memories. He was so personable. He really seemed like he was just so interested in us. We were so young and very, very fortunate to have him guiding us. And so, phase 3 was from 1975 through 1983. And it was the third chakra, or energy center. Buildings went up. We had a yoga university with college credit from colleges, the Golden Lotus airplane, oil well drilling, and plays from masters teaching stories. Dorothy Stanley is here to tell us of her experiences and what it was like.
Floods of memories, some to share and some not to share. I wanted to start with the quote from Yogananda that we chose to put on the invitation we mailed for the weekend this year. It so touched me. Carol actually contributed this when we were putting the materials together. Here's what Yogananda said. Once we were strangers, but when we love God, we become brothers and sisters. That divine relationship is the strongest of bonds. So once we were strangers, but when we love God, we become brothers and sisters. That divine relationship is the strongest of bonds. And that's my experience of living here and the opportunity of being here at the retreat. And that is from the moment I walked on the property. Although I will say I'm pretty sure I slept through my first meditation. And some of you may recall my snoring because it was a deep sleep. It was, I don't think I had stood still in probably 3 or 4 years. And meditation was like so foreign to the life that I was living. But there was something about the place and the rhythm. You know, my friends were here with me this weekend, one for the first time, and one has been here 5 or 6 times now. And my friend who came for the first time, she said, nobody's got an agenda.
Good comment.
And I thought, how perceptive. Yogacharya didn't have an agenda. Elbows off the table. I mean, how much of an agenda is that? You know, I remember really people who were very important coming for dinner, and Yogacharya would say, elbows off the table. And you could see that it was just disruptive for them. It was like transformation 101 at the dinner table. Now, I came here on staff after spending the better part of a year planning my travel schedule of my job in northern Michigan, so I would just end up here on the weekends or anytime I had a day off or between appointments. And I remember the fellow, I don't remember his name, I remember his look. Wayne, you'll enjoy this, African-American gentleman from Detroit, when he met me, and I got this really good job with the Department of Labor, he assigned me a territory that was everything north of Mount Pleasant. So my job was to drive around between Mount Pleasant and Houghton and Traverse City and Alpena and work for the Department of Labor. And who knew that Song of the Morning Ranch was in the middle of my territory? And I know that gentleman from Detroit sent me up here because he did not want to be bothered with me. And when I hear about this energy center, third chakra thing, it all makes sense. It all makes sense. Because as I've been with my friends, because you know, Eileen and Pam and Roy and Marianne and Carol, and I was on staff with Sadie, Sandy, Carol, Tom, Alan, Chris, John, Peggy, and Yogacharya. Because Yogacharya was really retired by then and he lived here. Although he left in the winter. Smart man, really smart man. And we would make ethnic dinners. Things he wouldn't be caught dead eating, but we would cook them up. And then I remember the other thing that was kind of the booby prize was boys' lunch. Remember boys' lunch? Like whatever was left over, that's what the guys got for lunch. And whoever the cook was who didn't know how to boil an egg, they prepared it. But we all survived. I would like to publicly beg Sadie's forgiveness. I remember she was retired. She had to be in her 70s or 80s when she lived here with us. And I remember complaining that she just wasn't carrying her weight. Now that I'm a little older and maybe a little wiser, I am so sorry. I didn't know what I was talking about. The young people at a event I had the pleasure to attend when we first got up here after Yoga Fest, were sharing about pod life. But I'm a Virgo like Yogacharya, so pod life really worked for me. It's efficient, it's all in one place, it takes a couple minutes to clean. So I don't know what they're talking about, because I thought pod life was a dream come true. Now, most of you who know me, and especially those of you who've gotten to know me now that I've come back for the last 15 years, know that I wanted to be a householder. Now, the route that I took when I left was a little circuitous, but then I met a man with 5 children, and it really sped it up. I have heard several stories this year that lead me to believe that I may have been willful in my youth. And I'm not completely cured. What else? This energy chakra thing, this is going to be grist for the mill for the next couple of years. I can feel it. I remember Eileen's wedding. Pam reminded me of her wedding. There were all these joyous family events that we participated in with her. My dream is that next year you'll all come back and Chris and Betsy will come. Sadie's here. Irmgard will come. She was scheduled but had to cancel. My brothers and sisters. Tom and I, and I know Tom's here, we would take the chainsaw into the forest and cut wood. I don't think it was officially girls' work then, but I think Yogacharya knew something about my energy level, and Tom's assignment was to wear me out. My favorite spot on the property is the back road. Do you remember Peggy? Her dad was the architect from Detroit,
Yes.
and she was here on staff. Peggy and I, you know, sometimes we would just need to escape. I know the staff never feels that now, but we would sometimes just need to escape. And it was always the back road with the excuse that we were retrieving the mail. But we solved all of our problems on that road and really became good friends. I am so grateful for this community. I learned here the value of spiritual community. My spiritual communities throughout my life have not always been yogis, but they've always been people who love God. And I learned that here, how important it is to have a spiritual family. And at the risk of sharing something that's very intimate and has never happened to me before and never happened to me since, I stand here today because Yogacharya told me 15 years ago on my birthday, which happens to be September 1st, in anticipation of my birthday, that where I should go to celebrate my birthday is Song of the Morning. And I've been coming back ever since. And the other thing I would tell you, my friends, is that I realized that I was embarrassed to come back. So it took me all those years to figure out that it didn't matter where I'd gone, what I'd done, who I'd become, that I would still be loved when I showed up here. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. That was beautiful. And happy birthday. Okay, phase 4 from 1984 through 1991. It was a mellower time, the heart chakra, big heart. People such as Sadie Nero, D, Smokey D, Mukti, Bob Rayner comprised the staff. Satsangs with the Yogacharya were filmed for the future. And there was much talk about how to develop the future residential spiritual community. To tell us more about phase 4 is Carl Schumann.
Well, I'm hoping I have my thoughts organized enough to be coherent here. It's very moving to talk about our life here, but I know that I'm talking to people who understand that what happened here when you're on staff was something fantastic out of the hothouse experience and blooming out of season. So, but I was here 84, 85, total of I think 27 months, and it was a little bit of a crossover. Some of the staff from the previous was still here, but soon to leave. We remember Mike and Kathy Tracy, they were about to leave and get married, and Joe Sterner was here shortly, and then he got married. Jan married Brian Hunter, and she was around helping a bit. So there was a transition going on when I first arrived, and I just forgot somebody I wanted to mention, but, I do want to mention, we finally remembered Paul McCauley. He was also holdover from the other staff for a while, and fondly of him. So it was an unusual time in the sense that I knew that there had been quite a much larger staff, and it got reduced to where essentially it was, besides Yogacharya, there was myself, there was, I knew her as Dee, and later she preferred to be called Smokey, and everyone loves Smokey, and then Sadie was here, unbelievable Sadie, hard to, I think, everybody has their own loving experience with Sadie. Maureen Hesketh, and then Carrie Smith, my dear friend who's sitting there, and she was with us. But it was a fairly small staff, and we're trying to figure out what to do. I'm going to tell a little story here about the discipline of Yogacharya, and maybe a little embarrassing to me, but we'll go through it here. And I want to preface it, I've told this story, maybe a couple of you have heard it, but it sounds like in the world of ordinary, if Yogacharya was, or somebody was harsh to you, well, that's somebody with their own personal motive, and they're trying to get something that avenges them. But when he was harsh, and he was training us, and it wasn't for that, it was for our advantage. So I'll preface this story by saying that. So I'm on staff. I won't go into the why I got on staff, because wasn't my idea. I didn't want to be on staff. I didn't want to do this at all. But that's the whole backstory. But so I'm on staff. I'm trying to be kind of, in the shadows mostly, just doing my job and just whatever Yogacharya wanted. But I tried to be pretty low key about things. So initially, when I was here, everybody, I don't know how many people remember the Renaissance building that Yogacharya had built. So it had several sections. So the first section was kind of an open area where they could have meetings and be used for, business functions and so forth. The next section had 2 apartments with a shared common kitchen. The next section, Richard will correct me if I've got the sequence wrong, but I think the wood shop was next, then the automotive shop, and then the other 2 sections were under development at that time. So anyway, so they didn't have any place to put me for whatever reason, so I got put in the first section. Well, that's not really a room. That's a big meeting room. It's got windows on 3 sides. If you turn on the lights at night, anybody can see, and you're in a fishbowl, But that's where he wanted me. That's fine. I'm in there. Just have one little niche worth of bed, and so that's fine. That was the initial setup. So, but Phyllis got mentioned earlier. So Phyllis was up here again at that time, and she was in my corner. That's Yogacharya's daughter. And unbeknownst to me, she's talking to Yogacharya when the apartment kind of opened up, and it was there, and the word I got was the apartment was going to be used for guests, so there was, no question, I wasn't going there. But Phyllis talked to Yogacharya behind my back and said, old Carl, well, you've got Carl, he hasn't got room for a change of loincloth. So because of her workings, I got into the apartment. Wow, I've got this apartment by myself. It's fantastic. My own shower. I got a kitchen to use. It's unbelievable. So I've really been upgraded. So, so what happens is that, like I said, I'm trying to play low key, and our work schedule at that time, we worked till 4:30. You had a little time to clean up. You had to be at dinner with the staff and Yogacharya at 5. So about 4:20, Yogacharya finds me. Stern. Say you! Follow me. So unceremoniously, he marches. He didn't even, care that that was my apartment. He walks straight in. I'm following him, I worked so hard to make this architecture and everything perfect for everybody. You come around, you put this stuff on the wall. Why did you put this stuff on the wall? Wreck my architecture. Well, totally ashen-faced, slack-jawed. I put up, I think, an SRIF calendar, maybe one of my drawings. That I thought it was okay. I didn't know. So I say something, I stumble, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I stumbled out something like, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I'll take it down in a second. Please forgive me. So there's a little pause, and he finally says, well, get back to work. You got work to do. So now it's about, 4:27. And I've got grease on my hand. I can't remember the project I was on, but I had to kind of get to a certain level of completion. But I promised to take these things down. But I've got to finish this project, and he sent me back to work. So I, finish up the project, try to get the grease off my hands, and it's about 5 to 5. I've got to get down. I can't be late for dinner. You just can't be. So I haven't done it. So I've got to go down, and the old man, God knows what's going to happen at the dinner with Yogacharya. So I come down the hill, and then walking along the pathway from the boathouse to the main house is Phyllis and Yogacharya. Oh, you, come over here. So I get up to Yogacharya and Phyllis. Well, Phyllis has something to tell you. And he leaves. So Phyllis says to me, Dad told me what happened. He said to tell you it's okay. So the little epilogue here is that at dinner, apparently I had said, I was just trying to put a few things in personalized space. So at dinner, oh, Carl, he likes to personalize things. So I give that little backstory to, we were being trained. I'm up here, I don't know why I really representing the heart chakra aspect, but the only thing I can think of that we have a lot, at least I can say this for myself, and certain people have related to this, we have a lot to get out of the way of our heart chakra, and these masters, their work is not selfishly motivated, it's to help us to get out of our own way and develop something out of our heart chakra and go forward in life, shifting from an ego-based life to a soul-based life. And you can't, well, anyway, I'll just say that, I think about gratitude, and I'll never catch up to the amount of gratitude. I could offer gratitude all the long day and not catch up to the level of what's needed for someone like Yogacharya. And I think I'll just, do I have a couple more minutes? Just 2 more minutes. So I just want to say that for me, I was already on the path before I knew Yogacharya, and so in miraculous ways I was drawn up here. But for me, he represented and does represent what it is to be a devotee of Paramahana Yogananda. To me, that's the epitome. I got this chance to see that. And I just want to circle back briefly to, I mentioned some of the people on our staff. We have a photo that shows that brief moment. Later, Richard and others came and helped us, but that brief time, those people that I mentioned, Carrie and I are here, but Sadie, of course, has moved on. Nirmala has moved on. I forgot to mention Nirmala. God bless Nirmala. And Paul, of course, moved on. And our lovely Smokey has moved on. But I think, if I may just say, I think there's Song of the Morning Astral. So I think that we try to imbue what we're doing here with all that uplift that's happening in there, and they're carrying on the great work in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. That was really wonderful. All right, phase 5, the throat chakra. Bob Raymer, clear light, music, Shakti, the beginning of the clear light community. And it lasted from 1992, Bob arrived in the fall of 1991, through around 2003. To speak about this special time, I introduce Denny.
It was the throat chakra. Can't talk anymore.
We don't believe that.
Well, I had the best of both worlds. I I lived here 2 years before the throat chakra time. And I moved up here from Ohio with my wife, Robin. We were the first people to live in the wheelhouse over here. The wheelhouse, going all night. And I worked in town. I managed the big boy restaurant at night. So after 1 year of doing that, pretty well sick of food. And so, unfortunately, Robin decided to leave, dissolve the marriage, and so I said, maybe I should go on staff, because I'm tired of running that restaurant. I need to get away and learn how to meditate and do all these things. So I went to Nirmala and I said, I want to be on staff, but please put me anywhere but the kitchen. She says, go into the kitchen. So I almost ran away right there, but I said, no, I'll stick it out. So I did get to serve Yogacharya for 1 year. And then after that year, I decided I really needed to regroup, and I moved to Florida, where I managed the restaurant down there, so I couldn't get away from it. But that 1 year with Yogacharya was unbelievable. I was a naive, ignorant kid, and my second week, I took over Carrie's kitchen. My second week there, Dee and Smokey and Sadie and all of them, they gave me a little list. If you don't do anything, don't serve these foods to Yogacharya. He does not like chocolate cake. He does not like spaghetti, and on and on. So 2 weeks later, I forgot the whole list, and me and Eleanor Kreitz were in the kitchen, and we were having this peaceful, beautiful day. We barely spoke to each other, but the energy was high, and we were like telecommunicating almost, and we just felt our hearts were just vibrating. But we cooked everything that Yogacharya didn't like on that list. We didn't even know it. So we put the food out there, and everybody shows up, and Smokey comes back, and she says, "What the heck did you do?" I said, "What did I do? What did I do?" He served all that food, and he hates all that food. So I said, "Well, I'm not going out there. If they need anything, you come back and get it." So about 15 minutes later, she comes back there. And she says, "What did you do to that food? He's had second helpings of everything." Big lesson, big lesson. It's not what you serve, it was what you put into it from your heart. So we made one rule that day. And only one rule that I ever have in the kitchen is, if you're in a bad mood, you gotta leave. Get out of there until you got your mood back. Including me too, because I'd get upset now and then. But, so anyway. So then I did come back from Florida. Well, Smokey called me at my restaurant one day, and I'm at the hostess stand, and I was right across from Cape Kennedy. So we had a lot of business. Oh, yeah, rockets going off every now and then. And she said, "Denny, I got bad news. Yogacharya's passed on." And I was standing right there, and I stopped. I couldn't even say anything. And this big grief started hitting me. Well, I knew. I kept on working and working. And 6 months later, I'm in the middle of sleep one night, and here comes Yogacharya. And this was not a dream, believe me. Wow. And he got right in my face. And he put his finger right up against my nose like this. And he said, "You get up there and feed the people." And he was that far. And he wasn't smiling. Well, next morning I quit my job. Went in there, gave him a month's notice. And I said, "Now, geez, I just bought a new car. I need a job. I got to help out the ranch. How am I going to do all this?" Within 2 weeks, every one of those problems was settled. Yogacharya took care of a job. Some guy called me, I didn't even know, offered me a job. Doc Friday called me, I need a roommate. Every single thing I needed was handed to me. So I came back to the ranch. And then Bob Raymer shows up. And I said, who's this guy? I heard Yogacharya talk about him. Well, that was a big change, but we were still grieving Yogacharya. You know, my brother said, you know, Yogacharya, that was our heart, our staple, our leader. So this guy shows up from California with Indira and Dennis Bowman and what was the name, showed up later. And so we're up there and all the changes started happening. And it was like, they started like almost unmantling everything that Yogacharya did. We were doing this wrong, we were doing that wrong. And one night I'm on the phone with Bridge Chabra, you know, in the office, which is the bookstore now. And I'm talking to him. I said, Bridge, I don't know what to do. There's a lot of these changes. Should I stay here? Should I leave? Da, da, da. Then I get a call from the Rensen. The Rensen is on fire. Call the fire department. So I called the fire department. It was right in the beginning of winter. So I grab a fire extinguisher and I go up there. And trees are blowing up 30 feet away from the building, popping into fire, and the windows are blowing out. And I look at this. I threw it down on the ground. And here comes the fire truck. So we sat in the fire truck in the back there as they worked on the fire. Well, they lost everything. They burned to the ground. Joe Newman lost everything he owned. Everything he owned. So that was my introduction to Bob Raymer's arrival. You know, this is phase 5. Things are supposed to be building up, not going down. So we lost that whole building. And so I remember going to Indira's apartment and getting her some more clothing. She was getting cold. And so one night we're up at the lodge there, and they had us singing Hindu songs, you know. And I knew some of the words, but and I was fine. I love music. I played harmonium and all that. Well, then after the meditation, Amy Simpson, you know Amy? I always called Amy my most stubborn friend I ever had. She never took no for an answer. She wanted to be in her concert, and I'd say no. And then 5 times later, I'd say yes. Then we'd come down here and play a concert, you know. So anyway, Amy stands up and says, I have a question for everybody, especially you, Bob. Why do we have to sing in Hindu? And he says, because I like it. And then he went around the whole room, everybody standing there, and asked us what we felt about him being there, taking over Yogacharya's spot. And he says, look, Yogacharya has done this to me once before, you know, in the Indian tribe. And I know Carol Armour was in that tribe because I was in that tribe too. I had a vision of it later. But somebody killed Yogacharya, who was the leader of our tribe, and Bob Raymer took over that tribe. Well, guess what? I don't know if you know who Scott Hazen was, but he was back there at the end of phase 4. Scott was on staff. And Yogacharya, every time he saw Scott Hazen, he would yell and holler at him. You didn't clean my car right. You didn't. I mean, he really got after it every single time he saw him. Well, finally, Scott left staff and he went to Texas. He was a radio DJ programmer. And he calls me from Texas one day and he says, I was meditating. And he says, I just discovered I'm the one that killed Yogacharya. That's why he was after me all that time. He said, now I feel some honor to get yelled at by him and all that. So you find these things out little by little. It sounds crazy, it sounds odd, but here we live at Song in the Morning. Everything was odd. So we got used to Baba. We called him Baba after a while. See, all this was painful stuff because our Yogacharya was gone. This is like your parents getting divorced and you got a new dad now, you know. You got to get attached to him, you know. So Baba didn't know what to think about me until one day he marched in the kitchen and he said, I want you to be the manager of the ranch. And he had someone else doing that. They had run up this debt and stuff, and they really weren't going anywhere. And I said, Baba, I really don't want to do that. but I'm always for the ranch instead of Denny. And so anyway, he said, good, because my first job that I want you to do in a half an hour is come up to the boathouse and fire the other manager. Oh my God. That was my boss from here. So I said, oh my gosh, I know my time here is limited. That's why I was forcing me right out. So I went up there. I had to do that, and it was creepy, unpleasant. And Bob is sitting on the couch, kind of not backing me up. He's over there watching me do this deed. And the other manager's writing down notes like he's going to get a lawyer later. So I still cooked, and then I still worked a little bit on maintenance. And I still did a little housekeeping on Sunday nights. And I was the manager now. So Carrie was my office manager. And so we said, look, we're in debt here. And Vic Steinman, he came up one summer, and I said, I'm 30 grand in debt. What the heck can I do this summer? So Vic came up, and I said, Vic, you can stay here this summer. And I said, I'm going to give you 200 gallons of brown paint.
Wow.
2 paintbrushes.
Wow.
You paint everything brown that you can see brown here. We couldn't afford to do anything more. So Vic, he stuck with it, and all summer he painted. And then at the end of the summer, it looked great. All the fences, the outside of the buildings and everything. And then he says, Denny, can I ask you one favor? He said, all my clothes are brown. Can the ranch buy me something to wear? So I gave him a credit card. I said, get a couple pairs of pants, a couple of shirts, some underwear, go into town. It's on us. So he did that. And so I know Vic's gone now. He died of cancer and all that. So Tinica was back here in those days. I don't know if you remember her, and the girl from Amsterdam who was a model, and she went skydiving, and her chute never opened. Well, she ended up here too, and many, many, many stories. And it wasn't about the stories. It was about this progression. Yogananda was here the whole time. Yogacharya was here the whole time. I mean, this is mass building here. And Bob Raymer, called him Baba, he was here. So they were all here. So every time I made a mistake in the kitchen and burned something, or, you know, that picture in the hallway, Yogananda doing this, that was in the kitchen. How many dishes of food did I hold up there and say, please save me, bless me, you know? We had a big weekend one time, and one of the last dishes I pulled out of the oven was these roasted potatoes. And I seasoned it just right, and there were about 4 trays of them. I had about 80 people out there, and I pulled them out, and I'm rushing now a little bit, and all the ones on the edge are starting to get black and started to smoke a little bit, and had this, I said, no, I wanted it perfect all the time. Yoga retreat of excellence. So I pulled them out there, and I said, Yogananda, what do I do? Also, kind of make a sauce. So I threw away the edge ones, and I made this sauce, and I put everything out there, and I go out with my little plate, and right across from me was this girl, and she says, "Ooh, good, potatoes, my favorite dish of all." And I thought, why do you have to sit across from me, lady? Because I didn't trust what Yogananda had did, well, it was a miracle, but, so I'm watching her, and I wouldn't take one bite till she took a bite. She doubled in those potatoes, and she said, "Potatoes are my favorite food." And she said, "Oh my gosh, this is the best potatoes I've ever had in my life." So I took up my plate and went back, and I thanked Yogananda again. See, it wasn't about me, little ego. It was about, we were always, all the time, taken care of. Oh, me of little faith, So, when Yogacharya called us his knotheads, remember when he said that about us? We were. I mean, we had more knots than a macrame store. And, He said, my job is to undo the knots in between your ears. Well, I must have had more knots than most people because lived at Southern Morning for 13 years. Wow. You know, 13 years I lived here. And he undid the knots one at a time. And my heart just sings every time I think of his name. See his picture here. But they're all the same. Bob Raymer, Yogacharya, Yogananda. There's no difference. And the whole big joke of it is that we're all the same too. We're no different than them. We are all the same consciousness. So where are we going? I found out one thing when I lived here. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to hide eat your bananas. There's no journey. We go around this whole thing called a lifetime, and we end up right where we started from. It just difference is that now we know it. You know? So, thank you.
Such great stories and wonderful memories, and we did get in trouble. But it was always good, and it was as if your karma was just sped up and burnt up. Things happen quickly when you become a staff member. That's what I've always been told. All right, so now we move on to phase 6, the spiritual eye chakra. A time when board, management, staff, and members needed to learn to depend on their own intuition, which Yogacharya made such an important point to us, that we develop our intuition. To successfully follow the pattern we had been given for the development of this retreat. Eddie McLeod is here to tell us about his experience as a staff member during that time. Eddie?
When coming here, I'm reminded of something a former staffer, Drew, told me in the kitchen. Anybody who's been on staff here knows you spend plenty of time in the kitchen washing dishes. He said, we come to the ranch seeking infinite consciousness, but first, we get infinite dishes. It's funny how some of the things that we dislike, we can get challenged to do until we realize that it's just another thing. I know I've heard many stories about Yogacharya challenging people with things that they didn't like, and them rising up to embrace the soul connection within themselves and the joy within themselves while doing things that they once despised. Actually, I used to hate musicals, and I was... When we follow intuition, that's what the masters will guide us to do. And, I'm honestly grateful that Divine Mother told me to be a part of that, because it was a very joyous and humbling experience.
Eddie, we've been requested to do it again.
So, I started on the staff 2005, and grew up going to SRF as a kid. My dad's, I think he's been studying Yogananda's teachings for like 40 years. and he never knew about this place until he went to Ananda, and talked to somebody about living in Michigan, and he was like, "Oh, Song of the Morning," and he's like, "What's that? I've never heard of that." He's like, "Oh, Northern Michigan, this amazing place. You got to check it out." So when he came back from his retreat, we went there for a Sunday service, and just blown away. Carol Armour gave us a grand tour, and I was amazed at how much history that she condensed into a short drive around the grounds. It was amazing. And a week later, I asked to be on work exchange, and I was here for about a month or so. And I remember the first day, I've never liked cleaning. First day I get here, and they're like, "Oh, it might have been Ian or Patty who was also working here." One of them was like, "Oh, clean the walk-in cooler," and it was gross, but it was a lot of fun. I was cleaning it with Dave Gaitis and Tinica, and I remember us singing, was it Lime Full of Coconuts or whatever? Yeah, put the lime in the coconut, whatever, that song, you know. And it was a lot of fun. I hated cleaning, but you know, you get over these things when you come to the ranch. The masters, they definitely work in mysterious ways, and Yogacharya, I have no doubt that he is here still working. He brings people here that need that spiritual refreshment at the right time. The synchronicity of events is undeniable when we're tuned in to this divine frequency. It's been a true honor and blessing to live here and experience times with spiritual family and friends. Feel very grateful, and it's been a true miracle, it seems, that this place even exists, given the almost insurmountable odds that have been against us with financial woes and the whole dam situation and everything. And it's been amazing how that challenge has brought the community together, brought the staff and the board and everyone to come and work together and be closer, and also have more outreach with the outer community of Michigan in general. Being here, I mostly worked over the summers, and I went to school in the fall and winter, and I definitely appreciate the lessons that I learned here more than going to school, really. They're just so much gratitude, I feel. There's being on staff here, I think I probably look forward to this weekend of Yogacharya's more than most, because the spiritual energy was so rife. Everyone coming here having such love and admiration for Yogacharya and love for one another. It's shown in all the wonderful stories and interactions that we have with one another. And seeing that is truly an inspiration. The the Master's teachings are living on through these inspirational stories and these experiences that we've had, which is why it's really important that we share them. As I've come to realize from meeting a spiritual master myself recently, these masters give inspiration as one of the most amazing gifts to allow us to fuel our own personal aspiration towards having a deep, lasting connection with God. So, in conclusion, I want to ask you a question. Will you take inspiration from these stories and these memories of masters and use it to fuel your own spiritual aspirations, making self-realization and a personal relationship with God your number one priority?
We will.
Thank you, Eddie, for coming and turning us down. Thank you, Eddie. We're lucky to have you.
There.
Okay, so now we're on to phase 7, the crown chakra. We are at the end of the developmental stages, and prior to finding the form that the retreat will exist for hundreds or even thousands of years, organizing our activities as a nonprofit organization, solidifying our presence in the digital age, Yoga Fest, and staff welfare characterize the time period from 2013 through the present. Our current staff member, Justine Markey, can tell us of her experiences. Justine.
Good afternoon. So, I don't have any notes for what I was going to share. This is a printout of an article that I found that I thought would be interesting for you all, because when I was thinking about, well, phase 7 in the future, I realized that it's difficult to speak about because I'm in it. I think it's a lot easier when you look back on things and you're not in it, and you can say, oh, that's what happened, and then you can speak from this place that, you know, there's more detachment. So right now I'm still like trying so hard to meditate and do all these, like I'm still just so in it on such a level that I don't think I can really say like what I've learned yet. I think I just need space still. I need to be here still, and then I'll need space to process what happened. Even this summer, I don't know what happened. And then we're right back into the next season, so I don't know if I'll ever really figure it out while I'm here. So, I was thinking though about just the future, and I guess really just like what characterizes this moment in time. So not necessarily just what's happening at Song in the Morning, but just like what's happening right now for this current moment in time, and in particular people of my generation, but also just everyone in this moment in time. And I was thinking about yoga, and I remember one time Sandy's told me this many times, and other people have too, that Yogacharya used to say that the word yoga would become a household word, and that everyone would look at him and not necessarily be able to see how that would be possible. Whoa, because it was maybe so counterculture, so few people are doing these types of things, being in a space like this, but now this is really cool and hip. And it's actually part of the reason that I came here, if I think about it, truly. Like, I don't necessarily like to admit that, because I think it's deeper than that, and there's parts of me that are for sure. But But really, when I think about it, I'm like, huh, it was like cool and hip. Like I had this friend, we were in college, we were doing chakra meditations and going to yoga classes, and we just were, she was really into Ashtar, many of you know her. She's very exuberant, so it's always like, all right, yeah, you're doing that, that's cool. And she'd like get me to go, and I'm like, all right, sure, I'll go do this thing. So I was thinking about yoga being so popular these days, and I was thinking about this phase, which Carol had labeled as 2013 to the present, and it's open-ended. And I was like, well, I know that so many people say yoga's become a household word at this present moment in time, and I was curious about some statistics. So I did go on the internet, which is something that we have here, very fast internet, it's pretty great. And I found this study that was done last year that I'm sure some of you have heard referenced, but this is a really great, this just brings perspective to me to what's happening right now, like in time. So, a new survey conducted by Yoga Alliance and Yoga Journal reports that the number of Americans doing yoga has grown by over 50% in the last 4 years to over 36 million as of 2016, up from 20 million in 2012. So still a lot of people, but I mean doubled in the last 4 years, which is, I think, when I think about what's, I don't know anything. I mean, I don't know what's going on in my own life, much less the world or Song of the Morning's future. I have no idea what's about to happen or what is happening. But I thought that was really interesting because, I mean, we all feel that yoga and meditation, it's everywhere. It's in schools, everyone's talking about it. It's hip. You over here in coffee shops. Like 1 in 3 people has done or is doing yoga, and that's incredible. That's huge. So I think that's, I mean, yoga is a really general word, and that means a lot of things to a lot of people, but that's still huge that many people are exploring what this is. And I think that a lot of people are naturally going to be looking for the deeper elements. So along with the study, the next statistic that I thought was interesting is that, hold on, this is good. Oh man, I don't know if I'm going to find it. Essentially, I won't put numbers on it, a lot of people who are a part of that statistic, the 50% growth, have therefore been doing yoga for less than 5 years, which is also really big because that means a lot of people are new, maybe not in this lifetime, like I get that as an element, but a lot of people are new to yoga, and what Song of the Morning offers is a deep expression of yoga, and so maybe this isn't necessarily the place like the newbies are going to go, but then again, I think a lot of new people do come here, and I think I see that a lot when we're hosting retreats and when I'm interacting with people, and then of course I know that about myself. Like I'm new to yoga. I've been doing yoga for less than 5 years, and so that just I just was like, wow. And then in lieu of being here for this weekend, I guess I was thinking about that and being like, wow. And then look at what's here and just the history and the lineage and all of you sitting here and everything that's been put into the last 40 years, these last 6 phases, to creating where we are right now in this moment. And even though I hear Carol talk about these being the pioneer days, and I totally get that in moments, I'm like, yeah, I see that in other moments. I'm like, no, look at what's going on, this is amazing. But it is pioneer days when you think about what's possible. And that's really incredible to me. So I feel really grateful to be a part of this in some way, and I don't know what that's going to mean in my future or future of Song of the Morning, who knows, but I feel excited about the potential, and I'm very humbled to be able to be here and speak in this moment, even to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justine. That was beautiful, right from your heart. And yes, this is an amazing movement. It's a collective consciousness. Yogacharya always told us that it would grow boundlessly. well, what's happening? And we're all very fortunate to be here on the ground floor, the pioneer days, as she said. So I'm going to write you a little thing that Carol wrote. And she said, Yogacharya and Master have told us much about the future and beyond the developmental stages. We have heard about a 17-story building with a revolving restaurant on top. 10,000 people coming and going. A direct connection to self-realization fellowship. A temple honoring all religions and connecting them with Master's universal principles of self-realization. And much, much more, including more money than we know how to spend and accomplish it all. Can you imagine? Such an accomplishment will take many generations of staff, board, volunteers, and members. To be a contributing part of it is an honor and a privilege. And Carol, you've done an incredible job. Thank you for all your work. Right now, if it wasn't for Carol, she just never gave up on me. Every year she'd say, Dee, you gotta tell them it's part of your story. And then I finally did it, Carol. Thanks for doing it. Okay, as we close now, I'm gonna try and do this. Some of you will hear the Yogacharya's words as I say it. He recited it to us by heart, and we learned it by heart. Just from his talks deep in the meditation, he would just start saying beautiful things and teach us poetry and the Bhagavad Gita and Ramakrishna and so many beautiful, beautiful things. So, in honor, one of his favorite poems, Still, still with thee. Still, still with thee, when the purple morning breaketh, when the bird waketh, and the shadows flee, fairer than morning, lovelier than daylight, dawns the sweet consciousness, I am with thee. Alone with thee amid the mystic shadows, the solemn hush of nature newly born, alone with thee in breathless adoration, in the calm dew and the freshness of the morn. When sinks the soul, subdued by toil to slumber, its closing eye looks up to thee in prayer. Sweet the repose beneath thy wings or shading, but sweeter still to wake and find thee there. So shall it be at last in that bright morning, when the soul waketh and life's shadows flee. Oh, in that hour, fairer than daylight dawning, shall rise the glorious thought, I am with thee. And one more thing, in my autobiography of Yogi, the brilliant book that has changed so many lives this entire world over, more printed copies than we could ever imagine. He graced mine with these words, so I will read it to you. Dear one, through Master's blessing, may God's presence fill your heart and thoughts and light your pathway with sacred joy. Yogacharya Oliver, Detroit, Michigan, February 11th, 1967. And one more thing I'd like to say. Yogacharya Oliver often quoted Swami Sri Testamenti. Everything in the future will improve if you make a spiritual effort now. By the way, that is the words and encouragement and wisdom of Yogananda in the Spiritual Diary on September 1st. Happy birthday, Yogacharya. Yes, she's over here. Oh, okay. She was hiding. I couldn't find her. I know. Okay, so we'd like to have Peggy Braden come up and lead us in the song Happy Birthday to our beloved Yogacharya.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Yogacharya. Happy birthday to you.
Love you dearly. And many more. Carol gets up and cuts this brilliant cake. Yogacharya would love this. He would just get such a kick out of this. It's just magnificent, Carol. Thank you so much.
This is a way. This is a way.
Take one of the apartments. One side's got the open eye, and the other side. I got that earlier.
It doesn't have to be real.
Take a regular one.
How generous you are.
Look at that. The cake is disappearing. It's magically disappearing.
Me and chocolate, real like